Okay, you all good? Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast.
My name is Daniel Hopewell and I'm here with my co-host Simon Delaney, and the title of today's pod is Why Good Data Leads to Good Call Centers. Now that's a kind of loose overarching title which we'll dig into, but we're joined by Dan Turner, Executive Chairman and CEO of Unity4, one of the largest truly virtual contact centers in the world, with operations in Australia, UK, Canada and New Zealand. So all the way from Australia, welcome to the show, Dan.
Hello, how are you both?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, it's early morning here. I'm guessing it's evening there, right?
Yeah, it is 5 p.m. So the kids are just starting to go mad, so they might appear in the background at some point, but that's all right.
Get them on the show.
Yeah.
They don't need any more exposure. We've got enough things to excite them as it is.
Okay, so we'll dig in. I was looking at your website, Dan, and the thing that jumped out to me was a line, "We deliver good conversations." And I thought, from a market perspective, that's a very nice line, but just it's a basic question, but can you explain what that means and what you guys do to get started?
Yeah, well, the tagline serves a couple of purposes for us. So the first thing is that as a business, we have, if you like, three, core areas to our offering in the marketplace. So we have our virtual contact center business. So we're a BPO provider or a call center provider, depending on which way you want to talk about it, to the not-for-profit and the commercial sectors. So we work with people like Vodafone over here in the Southern Hemisphere, and we work with most of the big charities around as well. And that's providing traditional call center services where the big difference is all of our agents work from home and always have. The next part of that is to do that effectively. We set about building a call center platform that is very specifically designed to enable home-based agents. So our Rapport CMS platform is nowadays also sold as a SaaS platform through some of the big telcos and other technology partners here in this part of the world, and indeed in the UK. So we have a SaaS offering of our platform, which is the same platform that enables our agents on the services side. And then the third part and the more recent part of that is our lead generation data business that we acquired 2 and a bit years ago, because more and more of our customers on the outbound side of our business were using leads as their primary data source to make acquisitions, and it felt like a natural kind of fit to our business. So there's the big virtual call center with agents, as you rightly pointed out, operating right the way across the world in the markets we operate. There's the SaaS platform that drives everything, that is a pure SaaS business, and then there's the lead generation business. So they all fit together to provide a fairly rounded offering to our customers. And therefore, good conversations is kind of what we aim to do through all of those things. Whether it be generate a lead that can deliver a good conversation that can turn into a customer, whether it be provide a technology platform that enables users of our platform to deliver good conversations on their behalf, or whether it be our own people that work for us that are having conversations all day with potential customers and customers. Again, we're aiming to have a good conversation. So it's a tagline that I suppose wraps up those three core parts of our business into one, and it also put some focus around where we believe the market is, which is all about, automation will automate the stuff that can be automated. So the call center marketplace, low value or simple transactions are being automated and should be being automated, whether that be through AI or voice automation or indeed just self-service. So where we think the future of the call center business is in that high empathy, high touch point stuff, which is about, doing the difficult things really well, and sales is exactly one of those things. It's very difficult to get an AI system to automate sales. It needs empathy.
I think it's I've not known another BPO call center operation actually have a data business as well. I can't actually think of another one. I don't know if there are, but I've always thought that call centers should generate their own leads. And you've taken a massive leap into that, haven't you? I guess by providing a few clients.
Yeah, and I think it was a decision we made for two reasons. The first thing was that obviously the cohort digital business we purchased is the largest lead generation business in the Australian marketplace, and had been a very successful business, and had been sold on to a publicly listed company a number of years ago, and we had a significant amount of supply through that business. So our customers, not directly by us, but our customers were all buying leads from that source, one way or the other in this marketplace. And when we felt that business wasn't being managed as well as it could be, we made a conscious decision that maybe it's a business we should get into so that we could help our customers do a better job with that side of the business. Because, the problem with being a call center is that you're often seen at the end of the food chain, so you have to deal with whatever rubbish comes out at the end. So, if you get bad leads in, you're likely to get better results, and it'll be the call center that gets blamed. So on all the outbound work we do, we're held accountable to the results. So it felt natural to try and, I suppose, control the supply chain a little bit.
I think that's very interesting already, because you're focusing on the quality of data, and that seems quite, it shouldn't be the case, but it seems a lot of call centers don't always do that. But focusing on the quality, like, why is good data so important to you?
Well, I think I think from our point of view, so we've been a virtual call center business since our inception, which is 20 odd years ago. So we've always run virtual call center business well before pandemics made it kind of trendy or at least necessary. I have a joke that we became an overnight sensation. It only took a pandemic and somebody to run a pangolin and a bat together. But yeah, so I think from our point of view, the thing about the virtual agent business that we've very carefully crafted over 20 years is that we have a very stable workforce. So we have projects where I retendered on a piece of business that we've had for about 14 years a little while ago, and as part of the tender process, we had to talk about staff retention and what we would do to make sure that we'd have a consistent approach to it from a staffing point of view. So we looked it up, and actually six of the 8 people working on one of the projects for a very, very large international charity had been doing it since we started it about 12 years ago, that particular bit of work. So that doesn't happen in normal call centers. Normal call centers are high churn and burn staff environments. We have a very, very stable staff environment. What that means is we can probably be a little bit more empiric about the results. I think most call centers really struggle to do really smart data analysis on the quality of data because the variability from an agent point of view is so significant. So when you've got a really major range in variability between your agents, and you're turning the agents over on a weekly basis often, doing any meaningful statistical analysis on data becomes really hard. So call centers tend to shy away from it and stick to the stuff that they know, which is around coaching and training and scripting. And I suppose from our point of view, we said, well, yes, we need to be best practice at coaching, training, scripting. We need to do all of that HR stuff brilliantly. And we can probably afford to do it better than most people because we're not churning through staff. If you're not replacing staff every week, you can afford to invest a lot more heavily in them. So we knew we could do the staffing side of it at a best practice level. And that really lent us to be able to really get into the data side of it. So every piece of data that comes into the ReportCMS platform or operating platform is coded. So we know what I always call the provenance of the data. So we know exactly, sounds like we're selling fish, but we know the provenance of the data, right? We know exactly where the data has come from, how it was generated, the provider that generated it, right the way down to the site code that it was on. So if it's a co-registration lead, we'll know that it's come through. We'll know that it's come through partner X that was generated on site X using X creative, and we'll also know if it came through a broker who touched it. We'll know that, and we'll also know what the exact price of that individual lead was. And every single piece of data, whether it be customer generated or sent to us, or whether it be through a third-party data broker, or whether it be through our own data source, everything in our platform is coded. And what that means is if we're working in Australia, we work for about 60 odd not-for-profits, as an example. What we can do is I can look at this, I can run reports across our platform, and I can run a analysis of a certain data type across all of our jobs. So very quickly, we can get very accurate benchmarking of data success and failure. So we know if a client comes to us, we're thinking about using X company's social media leads. What do you think? I can run stats across the entire company very quickly and have a look at what sort of results we might expect, because also every call type on our platform is coded by the call type. So I can go into the system and I can look up, I want to have a look at an outbound sales campaign for a financial services industry that's using this type of lead. What am I likely to expect, and who's been good and who's been bad? So we've got this, we very quickly realized by building this, if you like, this precedent database of information while we were going, we could do really smart stuff. And it's definitely separated us from the pack in the Australian marketplace, definitely, where our closest competitor has probably stood still from a scale point of view in the last 3 years, and we've kind of doubled. So the focus around data and the focus around analysis and really being smart is a product of A, we think it's really important, but B, we can do it because we've got a really stable, consistent agent base that actually gives us that consistency to do the analysis.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, because we noticed in the UK with some of the call centers that are either our clients or that we work with through other like the brands, the churn is huge in staff, and it's largely driven by data as well. So and I'm sure, I don't know if you guys operate the same, but what happens is when they have new starters come in, they give them like a lower type of data effectively that's going to convert at a lesser degree, because they don't want to waste the good stuff. But the problem is that can carry on for quite a while until they prove themselves. So it becomes really difficult to prove themselves. So
and it becomes a self-fulfilling.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes like a 50% churn. So the good ones stay at the top and end up with the best data, and you just have this constant like leaving beneath them. And so it's and the problem is that then when they all leave, it just repeats itself again. It's like a vicious cycle.
No, it's exactly what it is. And I think what you see is as well is that most call center providers, because they have that inherent sort of churn rate, it is hard to invest in the right level of training. They don't want to take risks with the better data source, so they do have to tend to put the newbies on the worst data. So as you say, you end up in this vicious cycle where it's really hard for an agent to succeed because they're almost set up to fail to begin with. So we spend a lot of time. Firstly, we don't do that. We put new agents come in, work on the same data set as everybody else, because we need to accurately assess whether an agent's any good at something. And the best way to do that is to assess their performance on the same data set as what the top performer agent is doing. What we might do is give them less hours to begin with. So we'll mitigate the impact the new person might have on the job. So we might ratchet up their hours on a job progressively so that we don't impact too heavily with new starters. But the other big thing is that I think call centers focus the wrong way. So what happens is, and clients do it for the same reason. What happens is if you've got a team of 100 people working on a project, call centers spend an awful lot of time working on the bottom 20%. They really focus on it, and clients will come to you and go, if you can get the top 3 performers either off the job because they're not performing or to start performing, our results will go up. And I always think about it a bit like, a sporting team. If you've got an institute of sport, I think, is it still in Lilleshall in the UK? Is Lilleshall still the high performance unit? They don't spend a lot of time when people come for trials to play for, if you go for trials for Manchester United do not look at the 50 people that turned up, get the worst ones and spend all their time trying to make them reasonable footballers.
No.
What they do is they try and pick the cream of the crop and make them brilliant. Okay? Because that's how you succeed. And call centers do it completely the wrong way. What they do is they bring in lots and lots of people, and then they spend all their time and effort trying to get the people that aren't actually very good at something to be okay. What you actually should do is give everybody a fair opportunity to succeed. But then once you understand the people that are going to win or lose, be fair and open and transparent and fast with the people you know will not succeed. And then really spend your effort trying to make the people that are good, brilliant. And it's always the wrong way around in call centers. People spend so much time trying to get the worst performers to perform a bit better. and we wouldn't do it we wouldn't do it on a sporting field, and we wouldn't do it in the Olympic trials. But for some reason, in call centers, people do it all day long. So we've always been very focused on if you split a team into 5 quintiles, that top one is you're gonna spend some time on. The next 2 down, you're gonna spend a lot of time on. The fourth one you'll spend some time on, but not a huge amount, and the last one you'll do really what you need to do to be fair, but not much more. And call center training is typically not done that way around. So you've got to focus on maximizing, accentuate the benefits rather than working on the negatives. And I think from a data point of view, that becomes the same problem, is that you take these people that have come in as new people. They might be new to it, they might be struggling. You give them the worst sets of data, and then you basically load up all your coaching and training in that spot. So what you do is you don't maximize the benefits you get on the top end. You spend all this time focusing on people that are actually set up to fail in the first place. So I think there are some, I don't think the outbound sales process in a lot of centers is done with much science. It's sort of done by people that are not trained in either psychology or sort of people management. Call centers generally don't have people don't go off to university to do a degree in call center management. Typically, the level of call center training and telephone sales training out there in the marketplace is pretty poor. It's a lot better than it used to be, but there's still no great gold standards for that stuff. So I think you do get a lot of people with the best of intentions make it up as they go along from a sales point of view. Often the sales manager in a call center used to be the best person on the phones. So they haven't got much.
It's something we've seen. I think, it can be quite archaic in terms of approach as well. It's like, this is the way we've always done it. We hear that quite a lot, which is it usually comes from dialer managers not wanting to change the way they operate.
Absolutely.
There was something a conversation I had recently with a centre in the UK where they changed the amount of time that they gave the agents targets on. So typically most call centres have like a daily target. They'd be like, you've got to hit 6, 7 sales, whatever it is. I think they lengthened it to like a month or a week. I can't remember. It was one of those. And what it did is remove the sort of daily pressure from the agent and actually gave them a bit of room to breathe and prove themselves. And they said it massively. So for the ones that were doing well already, they just carried on doing well. But some of the others, it brought them up because it removed this constant negativity around every day them going, you're not doing well enough.
If you sit in your your work environment every day and you've got somebody harassing you over your hourly results, a lot of people are not going to thrive in that environment. A lot of people are going to find that terrifying, and rightly so. So I think one of the things we did when we set Uni 4 up is we said, firstly, people are going to work from home, and secondly, we're going to treat them like adults. I have my running joke that I used to do at call center conferences, which is why I don't get invited to speak at them anymore, is that if you have to have dress up days or decorate your pod days, you've completely lost it. Right? If you think that motivating your staff in a call center is by letting them dress up as pirates on a Friday, you're screwed. Right? If that's what you've had to get yourself to, that's terrible. Now, if you've got a high-performing call center where people are having some fun and like doing silly things periodically, that's fine. But a lot of team leaders in particular seem to think that the way to motivate staff is to let them decorate their pod or come in wearing fancy dress every third Friday. And I always think, if somebody came into my desk and said, "Hey Dan, you seem to have had a good week. Why don't you come in fancy dress tomorrow?" I think I'd tell them, it'll be pretty short answer. So there is and that might be a slightly silly extreme, but it's about the point that a lot of call centers either manage their staff through fear because the managers don't have the skills to do it. They probably haven't been trained. It's not their fault. They've probably been promoted from the call center in the first place. So often the call center role particularly in sales world, is an entry level job where a lot of people come in not that well qualified. It's an entry level job. They learn on the job, and then they get promoted from being the best call center agent to the team leader, and then the team leader gets promoted to be the dialer manager or the call center manager. So they often don't have the training on how to manage properly. So often it's management by fear and hard stats. As you say, you didn't hit your targets, you're in trouble. or it's done in this kind of quasi patronizing sort of manner where we try and motivate them by ringing a bell when they get a sale. We had a vision to run Uni4 with it very differently, where we'd hire people that wanted to do the job because the job suited their lifestyle. So the job had a value to it that was intrinsic as part of the rest of their life. So actually, we didn't need them to find value because they had a mug with our logo on it, or they got to ring a bell when they made a sale. They actually valued working for Uni4 and our clients because it suited their lifestyle. It enabled them to live in the country where they wanted to live, or it enabled them to spend more time with the kids, or it enabled them to return to the workforce after having a kid, or it enabled them to be in the workforce because they had a physical disability. But for some other reason, typically a Uni4 agent has a reason to value the role because it's valuable to their life. And when they value the role because it actually is enabling other things in their life, they take that value through to the telephone calls they make. So then the challenge is not trying to patronize them or motivate them with silly things. The challenge is to treat them with respect and manage them as equals rather than call center agents. I come down really hard on any of my management that tend to refer to our call center people as the agents, as if they're some sort of second-class citizen that work on the phones. They are just staff members in my organization. They're no different to my client service manager or myself or my board. They're just people in the organization that have a role to do. So hire them carefully, make sure they have some purpose to what they're doing. Hopefully have that purpose that something relates not just to the calls they're making, and treat them with respect and provide them all of the statistics around what they're doing at their fingertips so they can actually take ownership of what they're doing. I don't have to tell one of my call center agents that you're in the bottom 30%. They run their own stats. It's all live on platform. They can see their results at all times. They know where they sit. They know where they sit against their team. They can take ownership, and because they can take ownership of their own results, you get a much different behavior.
I'm going to ask a question that might seem a bit basic, but I think is important. And Simon, you might want to jump in from a UK perspective, but we'll start with Dan. The way you're presenting this, to me, someone who's kind of a bit outside of the call center world, it seems like really obvious that people should be doing it like you're doing it. But then when I hear people who are doing call centers, it seems like you're quite rare from what I understand. Yeah. Is there a reason that other call centers aren't doing it like this, or they're doing the traditional method? Like, why has it not been embraced more widely?
Look, I think a lot of it does come down to the people it attracts. So staffing a physical call center is quite a hard thing to do. There is a lot of recruitment churn and burn, and you do attract a fairly transient workforce. And for us, the work from home model changed all of that because we suddenly had access to far more people. Geographically, it changes everything. So instead of hiring from a pool of people near our office, we hire from the entire country. So we started to hire. Once you get people that are working for you for a different reason, they're not transient, everything switches. It really is that simple. So I think a lot of call centers are just have fallen into a management habit around both their HR processes and the way they manage, and not looking at data the way they should for the reasons we talked about, simply because of the people they end up hiring. And it's because it's difficult. A traditional call center is often a high pressure environment, and therefore, you do end up with a lot of temps and backpackers and university students, and they're not valuing the job particularly. So it is high churn and burn, and that drives everything else. So I think it's easy to take the moral high ground and say you should staff it properly and manage it in a mature way. But that is easier said than done when you're running a traditional call center. I ran a very large operation here in Australia before we set Uni4 up, and we had a big traditional contact center doing really tough outbound sales work in the city, and it was a zoo. It was chaos in there on every given day, and it was a zoo because there was no other way of staffing it. It was very difficult to hire people. It was very difficult to retain them simply because of the nature of what it was. So it does come down, I think, to a structural issue about, traditional call centers are very difficult to staff well. And if you struggle to staff them well at an agent level, everything else is harder.
I think the other thing is that I've noticed is they can never get off the hamster wheel. So if you're going to make some fundamental changes in the business, you need to be able to sit back and reflect on what's going on and take time to change things. But call centers are just very high pressure environments, and you know, when we talk about this thing of the agents, so given the lower data and the constant churn, you'll have dialer managers that are looking after each campaign. So let's say you've got 4 or 5 campaigns, and every day they wake up and it's just about like hammering data, getting the agents on it. Nothing ever changes because no one can ever sit back and remove themselves. And the overall management that just look at the overall sales and the counting the profit or the loss, and they can't. Everything's a knife edge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we do reasonable amount of acquisitions of businesses. One of our corporate strategies of growth is we buy traditional contact center operations that are doing work that we like, and then we convert them onto our technology and into our business model. So, and that's something we've done successfully a couple of times. But the interesting thing about that is when I sit in sort of initial meetings with call centers that we're looking at buying, the amount of times that the senior people in the room can't sit still in the boardroom to talk about what we're doing. They keep running out to deal with things. And it's a telltale sign that the call center is, like you say, running on a hamster wheel. They're just putting out fires all day.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to take a strategic view.
Yeah. I mean, we've had it in the past. Before we went to software, we used to do more around lead generation. And I was constantly speaking to dial managers, call center operations about why don't you improve the quality of the data? So rather than just like jamming loads of list data in, start getting the really good agents and treat them a bit more like B2B, where you're paying them high salaries, train them a bit like what you were saying, training them well and give them really high quality rocket fuel. And they just couldn't switch their mindset to, but we just want data because it's cheap. It's the cost versus value thing. The understanding of was,
that's right.
It's just targets because they're given a budget and it's like, make sure the data comes in at this price.
That's right. And I think it comes down to the experience of the people. Like, we don't have dialer managers in our business, for example. Our rapport platform self-paces everything. So there is no decision that gets made by an operational person around the dialer. The decisions that get made are made by our campaign managers from a marketing and strategy point of view around the list types and the data we want to call. But then the technology does the logistics, because you end up in call centers with people that are often not hugely qualified, but have this massive amount of power in the business. And a dialer manager in a traditional outbound call center is a great job because you have all the power, but it's a terrible job as well because there's nowhere to hide and it's permanently there. You can't even go for lunch without the thing, doing stuff. So you're, I think they're those sort of high churn and burn call centers are difficult environments, and they don't value data the way they ought to. But also I think it's because they're used to buying, the evolution of the call center from an outbound point of view is 15 years ago, 90%, if not no more than that, 95% of all the data, all the calling we did was on data that was free. So it was publicly available white pages or yellow pages data, right? Or whatever it's called in different markets, but the phone book, right? Almost all outbound was done against the phone book of one sort or another, that 15 years ago. And then progressively that's changed to the point that now at Unity 4, for example, we don't have, we have one customer that calls what I would call lists. So other than their internal databases, obviously we've got customers that call internal databases, but when we're talking about acquisition using acquisition data, we've got one customer that still uses lists. Every other customer uses lead generation data of one form or the other. Not necessarily through us, but from somewhere else. We generate obviously a lot of data and sell it to our customers, but we also use just about everybody else's data as well. But as I say, not now, I would say, almost 99% of our total volume is all lead generation. So there are no lists anymore.
Yeah, it's one thing that I've never really understood, because it's ultimately this returns to the brand and what they'll accept, right? So a brand spends years cultivating their brand and getting the right message out, and TV ad, radio, everything. They'll spend millions, potentially billions on advertising. And it goes into a call center, they call a list,
and you have
90% of the people are pissed off about getting a call. Now they're associated with it, and you're like, straight. It's a strange world.
It is. I was in a meeting with on exactly that point. I was in a meeting with a pharmaceutical company a long time ago now, actually with one of my directors at the time, and I was explaining that I couldn't understand why they would spend all this money on this advertising. They'd spend And I was with the advertising agency in the room, and I think you're going to spend $1 million doing this beautiful advert where you've used CGI for the first time and you've done all this amazing stuff. And then you spend a few $1 million on the media spend. And then you've sent it to some dodgy call center in the middle of nowhere that's got some Irish backpacker going, hello. You know, this was fine right until the client spoke for the first time and went, I'm an Irish person, you know. Shit. But the point, but the point was valid, you know. It's exactly that, which is that so many times brands spend all this money trying to get their positioning bang on, but then when the actual potential customer has the first interaction, they have somebody that may not be on brand as they like. But also you have to bear in mind there's a structural issue in the way the call centers are priced. So the overwhelming majority of call center operators charge on an hourly basis, right? Yeah. So they actually make money selling bodies by the hour, right? Therefore, having far less leads and actually making fewer but better quality calls doesn't actually appeal to most call center operators, because they're getting, having 3 bodies doing the job that 20 bodies could do if we just called rubbish. The call centers make more money generally calling because they want more hours. So actually, even though they'll talk about wanting to generate sales and they'll probably put some money at risk on sales results, what they're normally trying to do is balance out, how big a team can I have that the client can tolerate based on the results.
Yeah.
So the call center pricing model is often not aligned to the client outcome.
But then, what's the cost to the brand?
I know, but you need the clients to work that out. And look, and they have. Most of the more sophisticated clients have now worked out that they don't want to be playing a churn and burn burn game, and that the only person that wins in that environment is actually the call center provider that's selling them hours. So a lot of the guys that are smart now, do know that they only want to use leads, and they are, as you're critically aware, of becoming really smart about how they buy those leads and how they manage those leads. As you see, the clever organizations are starting to take ownership of the lead management, at least. So they're using your platform and associated technologies to take control of the leads and then distribute them to the call centers. So rather than letting, previously in the old days, the call center would not necessarily organize the data, but would sort of, point them in the right direction. Whereas the clients are now being much more prescriptive about what they want called and how they want it called. Yeah. And that's only a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is this, you have to bear in mind, there is just this fundamental issue that call centers are generally being paid by the hour. So even though everybody says what we would really like is a few really good leads to get the same amount of sales from, that's actually completely against the business model of most call centers, which is ridiculous.
It's strange, isn't it?
It is really strange. But on the other hand, you don't want a situation where the call centers are working on a sort of a results basis, because that drives all sorts of behaviors. And in fact, they've looked at different legislation in Australia to actually stop that happening, so that companies can't sell on a pure results basis. So it is that balance between, partnership gets thrown around way too much, right? But as a term, but it really is a case that the good client relationships are ones where the call center and the client really are on the same page about the outcome, and they have that, they have that understanding that we need to do this properly with high quality leads, and you, the call center, need to be comfortable that that's what the project looks like.
Yeah.
And the clients are, the clients, right? You get nonsense in tenders where the client says, I want to call, X amount of people per month, but actually, if you work out what the real data would be, it's going to be tiny. So sometimes, the clients don't always help the mismatch.
No.
Sorry, one thing I want to just bring up, sort of slightly off piece, but obviously people listening to this show are primarily lead generators and brands buying leads. So I kind of want to bring it back to the lead gen side. Yep. And one thing we always say when we talk about stuff is the contact speed, and it's pretty much universally said that the faster the better, and that's kind of the understood thing. But I was talking to Simon about something, and this is what I would bring up, because he said that actually you had an exception to this rule, which I want to touch upon if we can.
Yes, it is perfectly true that getting to certain types of leads fast makes sense. What is interesting, we found. So what we do is we've worked with your guys, and we've got a live integration that goes from so a lead gets generated via any of, whether it be done by our own teams internally or whether it be our partners, it comes through through Data Bowl, it goes from an API live into our Report CMS platform and gets inserted into the queue with a recall time, which we can set. Now, bear in mind what I said earlier about every piece of data coming in with its own provenance. What it means is I can say, okay, if you are a social media lead generated on Facebook, where you've opted in specifically to talk to a client about X, I want that to come from the API into my platform into an agent within 10 minutes. Okay. Then a different lead type, I could say I want to call that back within 4 hours. A different lead type, I might say next day. And a different lead type, I might say leave it for 3 weeks. Now that sounds a little bit surprising, but what the data tells us is that different age groups and different recall times on different data sets respond differently. So an easy example of that is a co-registration lead. When you're sort of more old-fashioned sweepstakey co-reg lead, you either want to get to it very quickly, and I mean be the first one to call it, right? Or you actually will get exactly the same result by leaving it for 4 weeks. And when you think about it, there's some logic to that sort of intuitively makes sense, which is, if a co-reg lead is being sold to 5 people, right? If you're the first person that calls, you might get a good response. If you're the 4th person that calls, they're probably going to be having the shits by then, right? But if you wait for 4 weeks, the intent of a co-reg lead is pretty low anyway. So if you wait for 4 weeks, the intent hasn't really changed, but actually there's no noise, so you might be a better chance of getting cut through. So we see on our data, and we have huge amounts of data on this, that co-reg leads, get to them quick or stop and wait, and then wait until the noise has died down and go again, and you'll get better results. We know that leads generated on Instagram are great if you get to them really quickly, like as fast as the logistics of the world will
while they're on Instagram still,
if possible. We push it through and we just put it at 0 recall time. So basically, as soon as it gets generated, gets through your platform, gets through our platform, gets queued, goes to the first available agent. So it could be seconds.
Yeah.
We know with most Facebook generated leads, we set them at about an hour recall time. So it's fresh, but it's not completely kind of like in your face. And we also know that the faster we get to younger leads works better than older people, which again is intuitive, but actually works. So we can call. So if somebody's on, if somebody is in an older age bracket and they're on Facebook and we call them straight away, they tend to get a little bit less responsive. Whereas if it's a younger person, that's much more acceptable. They don't seem to freak out when we go, "Hey, you were just on Facebook doing it. Can we talk to you about that?" Whereas the older.
So do you do the recall time? Do you do the recall time by hour as well? By age, so you can go if over 60 or something.
So you can do the recall time by anything that you have in the data set. So the way most of our logic works is that you can apply like nested rules to anything in the data that you've got. So every piece of data that arrives, every data point on that data is available to use as a consideration, if you like. So you could set the rule up that said, if it's a Facebook lead where we know the person is 65 or over, where the creative on the Facebook used was X, where we haven't seen that telephone number in the system in the last 3 months, do this. So because what we also look at everything. So we look at the phone number when it comes in for the lead, on whether obviously it's being called on that campaign before, so we know whether it's a dupe or not, because obviously some clients want dupes still to come through, some don't, within a reason. But we also look at frequency against the rest of our platform. So if you've just come in as a lead, we can see whether you've come in as a lead across 10 other things in the same 2 weeks. So you can make decisions on all of that. But yeah, the big thing that we do is the big ones that seem to make a difference is lead type. By that, I mean co-registration versus a list versus the different social types, and age. They seem to be the big criteria. What the guys are doing at the moment is doing a test on time of day that the lead is generated as well. But I haven't got any data on that yet, because there's an argument about whether you're calling somebody. If somebody's responding to a Facebook ad in the middle of the day, or 11 o'clock in the morning, are you better to wait until 6 p.m. to call them about it? I.e., are they at work?
Yeah, we used to do this thing in the past where we look at the IP address, whether it was static or not, and you can see whether it's a home broadband provider, and then make a decision, or if it was on mobile, and then leave, like you said, leave it till after 6, or call it on a landline if you had it, based on if they were at home.
That's right. Well, almost all the leads nowadays are mobile, so we just work on the assumption that you can do. We're just doing simple testing around. If it's generated in the day of a certain age criteria, should you try and call in the day, or should you wait until later? So the point is that with and also then what we do is we feed back those results back into Data Bowl as they happen, or I think then there's a catch up process at night to fill any gaps. And that allows my guys to actually start looking at their buying and their processing, by the actual telephone outcomes, not just the lead outcomes. Yeah,
there's something in the UK with that we do. I don't know if it applies in Australia, if the difference is that vast, but we do a longitude. So for some clients, the brands that buy their own leads and then have like a bunch of outsourced call centers, they might have 5 people that they work with. A lead will come in, we'll do a longitude and latitude lookup, and then decide on the nearest call center because it works on regional bias. But do you have like accent bias in Australia, or is it not that prevalent?
Right. No, you do. It's funny if you like. I've been in Australia for 25 years, and I can pretty much pick the states now, but it's taken me a long time to do it. The nuance of it is really. Most Australians will do it immediately. Go, they're from Melbourne, they're from Perth, they're from Brisbane. It's taken me best part of 25 years to be able to do it, but I can do it. But what there also is a very parochial attitude in Australia around location of calling, and because you have to transmit CLI over here, so we have to transmit a CLI, and the CLIs are state based. So so if it's so when we're calling them, it actually becomes quite interesting. So if I call you on your mobile and you're in New South Wales or in Sydney, I need to make sure I'm calling you on an O2 number, which is a local Sydney number.
Yeah.
And we have what we call dynamic state-based CLI, which most of our competitors don't have. But basically what it allows us to do is to, when a lead comes in, to the best of our ability, work out where they're located. Sometimes on the lead we'll actually obviously get postcode. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we'll be able to match that phone number to a lead that's come in previously where we've actually had a conversation with somebody, so we know where they're from. So we do a whole bunch of matching to the best of our ability. We can't do a geo lookup here, so I can't ping a mobile number and tell where it is, even vaguely, which is annoying because it'd be really good just to know what state it was in. But basically, any lead that comes in, ideally, will have state, and most of our leads in Australia capture postcode or state because of the time zones. Because we're not on the same, because we're on different time zones, we can logically capture state because people understand why.
Yeah.
Because because you clearly don't want to call somebody in Western Australia that's on a 3-hour time zone difference to the East Coast. So we've normally got state. So then it's really important we call them based on their local. Call them with an O2 number if they're in Sydney, or call them an 07 number in Queensland, because otherwise they'll get really, really shirty because it's very parochial.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's fascinating. I mean, there's quite a lot to unpack there. I can't remember where I started with it, but I think it was the speed thing.
There's something that's worth pointing out as well, Daniel, just because we've done this on previous podcasts, that we work with Databall because obviously we try and remain completely impartial. We work with Unity4 because we work with one of the companies that Unity4 bought, and so obviously we work with them on that basis. But obviously for the
absolutely,
podcast, it's completely impartial.
Yeah. No, that's right. And our working relationship with you guys comes out of the cohort business that we acquired and a decision that we wanted. There was an internal lead management system that we weren't comfortable with long term. It was a platform that we didn't want to support internally long term, and we went out and looked for best of breed platforms, and we selected you guys. So our working relationship is based around us being a client of yours and using the platform. But that's as easy it is. And obviously, and like us with data as well, we, all of our data providers, we work with every person in Australia and New Zealand and Australia and the UK that produce data because we have to. So again, we have our own lead generation business, but we can't be precious about that. We have to work with everybody.
Yeah.
But yes, I do want to wrap it up now because I'm conscious it's your evening. I don't want to eat into your precious evening time, Dan. But I think the point I just wanted to make, I want to come back to, is that thing about speed, and that's very interesting because we've said that for a while, and it's fine to sort of say actually there are exceptions to these rules, and it all comes back down to understanding and analysing the data, it seems, and that's what makes it different. And I find it fascinating that you can get really granular, you can break this stuff down, you can learn more to get better results, and I think that's a nice kind of way of rounding it up to think of things in that way. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Dan. We've had a really interesting talk, and there's a bunch of questions which I've not even got down to because we've kind of got into depth and stuff. So we'll have to book in another one where we kind of get into some more of the granular stuff which I've got written down. So yeah, we'll invite you back for another one sometime. But thank you so much, Dan.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys. I hope you have a productive day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Dan. Cheers.
You're listening to the B2C Lead Generation podcast, and now it's time for the post-chat rundown. It's pretty simple. We talk through the conversation, assess what we've learned from our guest, and pull out the key ideas for you, the stuff we think can make a real difference to your lead gen.
That was Dan Turner from Unity 4 talking to us about why good data leads to good call centers. What do you think, Sam?
You'd never know he was from England, would you?
I didn't know until about when he mentioned it towards the conversation. He's like, I've been here 25 years. I was like, oh, I just assumed he was Australian. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's amazing how the accent can change. There was something in the conversation I've thought for a long time that I'm glad we touched on, which is it's generally quite large brands that use call centers, and they're sort of mid to high tier ticket items, which is stuff like mobile phones, energy, broadband. They typically changed or renewed every year as well. And what's amazing is a lot of these companies spend millions on advertising and fostering the impression of the company with their prospects and consumers and current customers. And they build the brand really well and have massive agencies looking after them. And what I'm always shocked about is they'll then have a call center dialing data with virtually zero intent of hearing from that brand and destroy all that brand reputation they've built on 95% of the data that they call, where it's just going to piss people off that they've tried calling them. And so we touched on that with Dan. He said, it's something that people have slowly come around to. I mean, I've been talking, like, without blowing my own trumpet, I've been talking about this for literally 7 years, I think. The same thing, which is why calling was data with no intent. I've been involved in this, right? I mean, it's not like we've, in the past when we were a media agency and we used to pass data to brands, we'd work with co-sponsor and stuff, but I was always talking about it at the time. And it just amazes me that the brands allow this to happen because, you want people that want to hear from you, that want to be your customer. You want data that's actually, transparent. It knows you're going to be in contact with it. And it helps the agents. It really reinforces the brand. It helps the prospects. They actually hear stuff that they want to hear and get contact from people they want to. So I'm really glad that we touched on that with Dan. He explained, that that's how they try and work with their the brands they work with as well.
Yeah, he was a really good guest. I think I sort of asked this during it, but I sort of maybe naively kind of said, why not doing this? But I think he sort of said because it's big, it's hard to change it. Lots of things are done in the same way. So you were saying that you used to do it and then you've changed over the course of however many years, and it is a difficult task to get people to change and to do things in a different way. But it's nice when you speak to someone who is doing it in a way, and I've heard you talk about this for ages. It's nice to speak to someone, of course, who's doing it in a way that it's not say better, I don't want to use that word because it sounds too subjective, but it seems to be away from the sales-centric thing and more into the human-centric approach to stuff. And it was really interesting. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there because I think it's been quite a long podcast, but we'll definitely bring that back around. I think for its own pod. I think in the future we'll get into that in more depth later. Nice one.
Okay, cool. All right, cheers.
Thanks for listening to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast, the show for serious lead generators. Be sure to hit subscribe to hear more from those at the very cutting edge of the lead gen world.